Is a 15-year-old budget DSLR from 2010 still worthwhile in 2025? Yes, it is. Thanks for watching, see you next time. Okay, so let's be serious. In August 2011 on this very channel, I released a video about a pretty normal and unexciting camera. It was Nikon's latest budget-friendly and beginner-friendly DSLR, the D3100. They released this a year before in 2010, but it took me a year to sort of get hold of one and actually start using it. It had a few headline features like autofocus and HD video, H.264 codec, but apart from that it was pretty much a run-of-the-mill budget camera from Nikon. The video did very well. It was a walkthrough video just guiding people through all the different settings and all the different menu options, explaining what they were. Very much squarely aimed for the beginner photographer who had never used a DSLR before. Today in 2025 that video has 1.8 million views, and I still consistently get between 3,000 and 5,000 views every month on it, which is kind of crazy really. I still get loads of people asking questions and leaving comments on there about the camera as well. So it seems like for some reason the D3100 is really popular even now. So what is it about this 15-year-old budget DSLR that is still seemingly so popular, and why does so many people still talk about it? Well, I went out and bought one with the 18 to 55mm kit lens, and I've been using it for the last few weeks just as any normal person would, just taking pictures of everything and anything I can see. So throughout this video I'm going to share some thoughts on the camera, some tips to make using it a little bit better. I'll show you a load of photos that I've taken, and at the end we'll kind of come to a decision. Is this camera really worth it in 2025? So let's just go over a few specs and details about the camera. As I said, it was released in 2010. It was September, I think, the end of September. It's got a 14.2 megapixel sensor. It's APS-C, or DX as Nikon likes to call it. It was upgraded from the Nikon D3000, and this one's got the new XP2 processor over that one. It's got an 11 area autofocus with the Multicam 1000 system. It's worth noting that on these lower end Nikon bodies at the time, there was no autofocus motor built into the camera body. You had to rely on the lens to have the autofocus motors. So you had to use the AFS lenses, or the AFP lenses I think were compatible with this. Or if you were using third-party lenses like Sigma, you'd have to use their HSM lenses. One good thing about the D3100 is it does actually have the rangefinder function, which means that you can manually focus, and in the screen or in the viewfinder it turns the exposure meter into like a rangefinder, and it tells you which way to turn the focus ring and then tells you when the subject's in focus. So that's quite handy, and I've actually been using that quite a lot with this when I've mounted some of my older manual focus lenses. It's got a 3-inch 230,000 dot TFT LCD. The LCD is completely fixed. It doesn't come out or rotate or turn around or anything. It's just as it is. The camera also features live view with autofocus. This little switch here just switches it into live view. It's worth noting that the live view function uses a different autofocus system than the other way, and it's a lot slower and not really that accurate. So autofocus in live view is not great. It also does 1080p video at 24 FPS, but that is limited to 10 minutes at a time. The shutter on this goes up to 1/4000th of a second, which is pretty good. I don't think you really need much faster than that too often, but it is limited to 3 FPS in burst mode, which is not so good. As I said, the camera is very much aimed at beginners, and as such it's got a guide mode built in, and this basically guides you through what all the aperture and ISO and shutter speed does. It's kind of like a glorified auto mode, I suppose, but it's quite good if you've never used a DSLR before and you're not really sure what all the settings do. That's quite a good one. And as usual, it's got all the other different scene modes like portrait, sports, landscape, macro, all that kind of thing. I did do a separate video on the mode dial of this camera, and I think I've also done it on the D3200 and maybe the D5100. It was so long ago I can't remember. Basically the mode dials are all the same anyway, and that goes through what each mode does on the mode dial. As well as that, of course, you've got your manual controls, M8, S and P, so if you want to use the camera fully manually, you can. As for the lens, I've got the standard original kit lens that came with this camera, which is the AFS Nikon 1855 3.5 to 5.6 G VR. There was an updated version of this, it was called the VR2, and then I think after that they might have moved to the AFP lenses, but don't quote me on that, I'm not entirely sure. I only ever used one once. I think it had the locking button on it, if I remember rightly. As a lens goes, it's fine. Don't expect the ultimate in sharpness, but for a beginner, it covers a really good range. Wide angle 18 and goes all the way to 55 and 35 in the middle for portraits and stuff like that. So as kit lenses go, it's not the best, but it's a great lens to get started. And the price of this entire package that I paid was £100, and I really don't think you can argue for a camera and a lens for £100. That's going to be way better than any point and shoot or bridge camera that you'll get for the same sort of money. Another point to make about this, I would really recommend shooting in RAW with this camera. If you don't know what that means, then you'll have to go do some research, because I don't want to go into it in this video because we'll be here all day. But basically, RAW is the kind of unedited capture of the sensor data. Camera doesn't do any processing to it. You've got to do the processing in a software like Lightroom or Photoshop or something like that. The reason I say that is not just to be one of those people that says you have to shoot RAW, but the dynamic range on this camera, which means the difference between the darks and the highlights, leaves a bit to be desired. I found, because I've been shooting this in RAW and JPEG mode, because I wanted to compare, and I'll show some examples of the JPEGs compared to the RAWs that I've edited. But I found that with this, if you accidentally overexpose an area slightly, with JPEG, it does that quite easily. With the RAW file, you've got a little bit of leeway to pull that back. Still nowhere near as much as modern cameras, but it just gives you that little kind of safety net. If you rely on the JPEGs, you might find that they're all slightly overexposed in areas, or the shadows are too dark. I'd recommend, if you have never used a DSLR before, to set this to shoot RAW and JPEG, and then you can compare, and you've got the option to edit them yourself. If you just want to use the JPEGs, then that's fine. They do look really nice actually when they're sort of properly exposed and there's no blown highlights or shadows. But I'd really recommend getting used to shooting RAW and getting used to editing. It makes everything just look nicer generally, because you can get it how you want it. You can control the shadows, the highlights, the contrast, the colour, the white balance, all that kind of thing. You don't have to use paid software like Lightroom. There's other software that's free to use, so you don't have to spend a load of money if you don't want to. But yeah, I really recommend on a camera like this, as this old, to shoot RAW. Another thing worth mentioning about this kit lens is it actually focuses pretty darn close. I was actually surprised. It's been so long since I've used one, I kind of forgot. But you can actually get some pretty decent macro results from this lens. It's not going to be a dedicated macro lens, but if you just want to take like pictures of flowers up close and stuff like that, it actually does really well. That's another thing, that using the kit lens has its advantages like that. On the other hand, the image quality when you get closer isn't as good as it would be further away. That's just how lenses tend to work generally, unless they're specifically made to be super sharp up close. But just for everyday kind of general purpose stuff, if you want to get a flower or get up close to a person or whatever it is, it actually focuses really close and it looks really good, and it's perfectly sharp enough for posting to Instagram or Facebook or anything like that. So I'm going to throw up a few images that I've taken recently. I've taken quite a few with this kit lens because I want to show what this kit can do. But I've also used my old Sigma 70-200 f2.8 and my Samyang 85mm f1.4. I will show those as well because I want to show what the camera can do when you put some really good glass on it. And I'll probably at some point also stick my wife's 200-500 on here and try and do some wildlife photography. But I might do a whole separate video on that because that's going to be ridiculous. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the photos I've taken then. First of all, we're going to look at with the kit lens, the 18-55. And as you can see, I've got the JPEG straight out of the camera on the left, and then my edit of the RAW file on the right hand side. Now, editing is a personal thing, so whether you like the edit or not, that's not really relevant. I just wanted to show you this kind of looks you can get with the camera when you shoot the RAW. So having a look at the JPEG then. There's nothing wrong with it. It's perfectly sharp. This was shot at f7.1. We've got some fairly good shadow detail. A theme you'll see, and like I mentioned in the other bit, is that the highlights do tend to blow out quite easily. And then even on the raw file, pulling the highlights all the way back, you can't get them completely back, but I think it gives quite a nice dynamic contrast look on these raw files I've edited. The little bright patches I quite like. Another image, same place, just a little bit closer again. Sharpness is really good, and yeah, the dynamic range, you can see the little garlic flowers are a bit blown out. Even on the raw file they're not perfect, but it's I think it's quite a nice image. Another composition here, again we're at f7.1, 18mm. Again, sharpness is absolutely fine. Highlights are blown out again, but again on the raw file you can see I managed to pull a little bit back, so there is some room to play with. But yeah, I'm happy with those. And this image, you can see the JPEG. I underexposed quite a bit because I wanted, this was really bright, this section down here. So I wanted to try and not blow that out, but in doing so the tree has gone a bit dark. But as you can see on the edited raw version, I did manage to pull some of the shadows out a little bit, but we've still got really good detail all the way through. Down in this corner. Yeah, I was really happy with that as well. Another one here just to show the close focus a bit. I focused on this log down here, I think. You can see I'm at f5. Yeah, another good sharp image, I think. Again, that was taken at 18mm, so I've got the really nice wide angle look, but with the close focus down on this bit of wood. This one was taken at 55mm, f5.6. Again, really good, detailed all the way through. I think I focused down on these ferns and this garlic down here. Yeah, another nice image I was happy with. This one is just the edited raw file. Just wanted to show the close focus again. Really good detail. I can even see like a bit of a cobweb in here. I think they've got a really nice, soft but still sharp, if that makes sense, look to them. The sensor on this camera gives a really nice look, I think. Now I want to show a couple of images with a different lens. This is my Samyang 85mm f1.4. This is a fully manual lens, manual focus and everything. It is quite tricky to nail focus at f1.4, but I think I did it right on these. This is again the JPEG straight out of the camera, and this is my edited raw on the right hand side. As you can see, I was at f1.6 for this, just to try and get a bit more in focus. But I think you will agree there is nothing wrong with the sharpness on here. The only thing I will say is we do have a little bit of chromatic aberration, but that's down to the lens, not the camera. But the sharpness, really good. Contrast, really good. Even on the JPEG, I think everything looks fine. I just boosted the colours a little bit and brought the shadows up a little bit on the edit. But yeah, if you put a good lens on the D3100, then you get really nice images out of it. This set is with the Sigma 70-200. As you can see, I was at f2.8 at 70mm. Again, it's really sharp. You do have some slight blown out bits, especially on the back here. But again, on the raw file, I did manage to pull a little bit of it back, so it's not quite so bad, especially on a nose here. But the sharpness, again, absolutely fine, nothing wrong with that at all. Just got a few more to show you. My cat being silly. And you've got the JPEG again, and then the edited RAW. This is at f2.8, 116mm. And again, the sharpness is absolutely spot on, no problem with that at all. These two are quite good to show the dynamic range, how much you can pull back. This was with the Sigma f2.8 150. As you can see on the JPEG, the background is pretty blown out, but on the RAW I did manage to pull it back quite a bit. I just pulled the highlights down a bit, pulled the exposure down a bit, and then put the shadows up a little bit just to get the detail back on the cat. But again, sharpness, incredible. I think if you didn't know that this was taken with a 15-year-old budget DSLR, you would have no idea. Any camera, modern camera, could have taken this image and you'd be happy with it. Another one, just again showing how much you can pull back. It was slightly overexposed, but I managed to pull it back and get a really nice image. Same again on this one. The size of this body is, I actually really like it. I kind of wish we still had things like this. If I compare it to my Nikon Z8, they said that mirrorless was supposed to be small and compact. Well, yeah, look at the bloody difference. I know this has got a big lens on it as well, but just the size of the body is vastly different. I actually find that the D3100 with my Sigma 70-200 on it is possibly one of the most comfortable combinations I've ever shot with. The lens is just in the right place to hold the lens and hold the body, and it just, yeah, it feels really good. I was really enjoying shooting with that combination. With the 18-55 on, it's not quite as ergonomic, but the grip is fine. I've got small hands anyway, so I don't have a problem. You've only got one control dial on the back, which took me absolutely ages to get used to, having shot with cameras with front and rear dials for so long. Depending what mode you're in on the mode dial, that dial does different things. If you're in shutter priority mode, it changes the shutter speed. If you're in aperture priority mode, it changes the aperture. If you're in manual, it changes the shutter speed, and then you have to press the aperture button here, or the exposure comp button, hold that down, and then you can change the aperture that way. You do have a back button focus, AFL lock button as well. I have actually put back button focus on this. I did a video about that back in the day as well, but I will quickly go through it again today. What that means is it takes the focus off the shutter button and puts it on this rear button. So if you're trying to take a picture of something, let me take the lens cap off because it looks silly. If you're trying to take a picture of something in front of you, but you say you're taking a portrait of someone, but you don't want them dead in the center. If I was to focus on them with the shutter button and then move the camera slightly to recompose, and then once I went to press the shutter button again, the focus would move off that person. So what I can do with back button focus is I can focus on the person holding down the back button. I can release the back button, move the camera slightly, and then use the shutter button to take the picture. So that just takes the focus off the shutter button, so when you actually go to press to take the picture, it doesn't try and refocus. One main reason why I like doing this on this camera is because the focus points are very limited, and I found that only the center point really works very well. Normally I would suggest, if you're trying to take a portrait and you wanted the person off to one side, you'd move the focus point over to one side. However, on this I found if you move the focus point off the center onto the, I think you've only got one other focus point off to the side. Let me just check. You've got two off to the side, but I found that both of those really struggle to focus on people, especially if you're in a slightly lower light situation like inside. So what I've been doing is I've just been leaving it on the middle point and then using the focus and recompose method with the back button. I will leave a link to the video I did on that. I think it was on this camera. If it wasn't, it will be on the D5100 or something, and it'll be basically the same steps. You'll be able to find it. A lot of the questions I used to get after I posted the initial video was how to get the blurred background look, the kind of portrait mode look, I suppose you'd call it now. with this lens it is possible. It's not going to be as easy as if you had a wider aperture lens, but you still can do it. A lot of people used to get confused because there's a portrait mode on the mode dial. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get background blur. That just means it's setting the camera up to take a portrait of someone, so it's going to set the shutter speed to a certain thing. It probably will widen the aperture mostly, but not necessarily. So what I would recommend you do is put it in aperture priority mode, or A on the mode dial. Set the lens to somewhere between 35mm and 55mm. If you've got the space, set it to 55mm is probably the best bet. The most important thing to get that background blur is to make sure the background is really far away from the subject. If you've got a person stood up against a wall, that wall is not going to be out of focus no matter what you do. So you want to make sure there's at least 6 feet distance between the person that you're taking a picture of and the nearest thing in the background. So as you can see in the woods that I'm in now, I'm shooting on a 40mm lens and the aperture is at f3.2. And you can see this tree just here is kind of out of focus on this, but it's only like 3 foot away from me. If I was to set this up in the same position, that tree would be pretty much completely in focus just because of the aperture of this. At 55mm, the widest aperture is 5.6, so you're going to have the background really far away to blow that out and to blur it. So what I might do is use the D3100 and I'll take a picture of the ZF I've got set up on the tripod, and I'll shoot at some different apertures so you can kind of get to see what the background blur is like on this camera. So I'm at probably about 26mm on the focal length. That gives me an aperture of f4.5 at the widest. So there's that. Then I'll change the aperture to f5.6. And then f8 just for good measure. So here is the photo I just took. It was at 29mm. I was a little bit more zoomed in than I thought I was. But yeah, this is f4.5. You can see the background is quite nicely blurred. You can still see that we're in a forest and that there's trees and stuff about. And again, the highlights are blown a little bit, but yeah, that's at f4.5. That's at f5.6. You can see a bit more detail if I go backwards and forwards. Not a huge amount of difference. And then at f8, the background's pretty much in focus. And what I'm going to do now is the same thing, but I'm going to extend the lens all the way out to 55mm. The widest aperture I've got now is f5.6. So I'm going to take a picture of that, and then I'll stick it down to f8. Again, just to show you. Zoomed all the way into 55mm. This is at f5.6. The background's really nicely blurred. As you can see, I haven't moved. I'm just taking a picture of the camera, but because the camera and the background has got such good separation, you get really nice background blur. And then at f8, even at f8, it's still pretty good background blur. If you compare the two, there's not much in it. The light changed a bit, so the specular highlights on this f8 are a bit more pronounced, but actually the actual blur itself is pretty similar. So even at f8 with the kit lens, you can get decently blurred backgrounds. Doing the opposite, I'm going to put it all the way to 18mm now, and I'm going to be at the same position. I'm going to go to the widest aperture we've got, which is f3.5. So I'll take that. I'll go to f5.6, and I'll go to f8, and then at 18mm, f3.5. As you can see, the background, it is slightly blurred, but not really very much, and you can clearly see that we're in a woodland. f5.6 looks pretty much exactly the same, and then at f8 it's a little bit sharper, but again it still looks pretty much the same. So it just goes to show that the position of the subject in the background and the photographer makes a huge difference when trying to get blurred backgrounds. So you can absolutely get pretty decent background blur with this setup. You just need to be aware that you need to be at quite a long focal length, so 35mm or above, up to 50, and use the widest aperture you can get, and the background has to be far away from the subject, and you need to be reasonably close to the subject as well. I'm just going to very quickly talk about video on this. As you can probably tell, I'm shooting video with this now. I have no idea if it's in focus, and the sound you're hearing at the moment is coming from this microphone, not that one. We'll switch to that one now. It's probably going to be absolutely awful. We're in the woods, it's quite noisy because of all the birds, and the microphone on that camera is probably rubbish. But yeah, it does video 1080p, 24 frames a second, limited to 10 minutes. The autofocus is probably crap. It doesn't have face tracking or eye tracking or anything like that. So yeah, this is what it looks like, and that's enough of that. At the beginning of this video, I kind of made a bit of a joke, but the question was, is a budget DSLR, especially like a 15-year-old one, still worthwhile in 2025? And my answer hasn't changed. It's still yes. Yes, it absolutely is. Obviously, it's not going to be for everyone, but if you're someone who's just starting out photography, or if you're someone who's taking photos with their phone or a little compact camera, and you want to step it up a bit in terms of quality, but you don't have a huge budget, then something like this is absolutely perfect. As I said, I paid £100 for this, for the lens and the body. If you search eBay, you can get them cheaper. That's just what I ended up paying for the one that I bought. I've seen them go for as low as like £60, and I've seen them go as high as sort of £200, which is just crazy, but I won't spend more than sort of 150 on something like this. But what this does for you is it opens up an entire range of lenses. You don't have to use this kit lens. If you buy a really good lens and put it on here, this is going to be a really good setup. If you buy a really mediocre lens and put it on here, it's still a good setup, but you're going to be limited by the lens, not by the body. Obviously, if you want to do sports photography or wildlife photography or really fast action stuff, you're going to be limited by the body in terms of frames per second and the speed of the autofocus. But if you're just someone who wants to take pictures of their friends whilst you're out, or just landscapes or architecture, or just normal everyday stuff, then something like this I think is really a bargain. For £100, you are not going to beat something like this. So that was the D3100 in 2025. I hope you like this video. If you want me to do any more, that was a deer. Same to you. Shush. Seriously. Yeah, so I guess that's the end of that then. I came into the woods because I thought it'd be quiet.